What is your I survived story? I am a flight instructor. The first 500 hours of flight is called the killing zone. However, many flight instructors are hired right out of flight school 190 hours to 250 hours depending on the path. I had maybe 200 hours at the time. I flew into a small dark cloud that was obviously a thunderstorm. Completely dumb thing to do. Within seconds, ice built up on my wings and propeller. Next thing I knew, I was falling out of the sky. Wings with ice on them no longer fly. Nor did my propeller offer any power. My attitude indicator had tumbled. I had no idea of attitude. And my turn coordinator was beyond standard rate turn. Altimeter was circling fast. Like 500 feet per second. We broke out of the clouds maybe 500 feet above the ground. Nose down. And I was able to recover within 100 feet of crashing into the ground. I was training Chinese students at the time. And after that, they were scared of any weather. When I was 6, my mom, brother, neighbor, and her son all took a trip to the beach. On our way back, we were driving on the highway at about 75 miles per hour. I was in the car with my neighbor and her son. My mom was in the car behind her with my brother and his friend. Side note: my mom and my neighbor were having an affair. My mom had filed for divorce 6 months prior to this event. My neighbor turns around to ask us what kind of ice cream we wanted at the next stop. Two 16-year-olds were driving drunk on the opposite side of the highway. They came flying across the median and hit our car head-on. Going over 100 miles per hour. Our SUV flipped over and over and over again. It was a crunched up mess by the time it came to a stop. My mom watched the whole thing. Both of the boys who hit us were killed on impact. My neighbor died. My neighbor's son had a fractured skull. Broken ribs. Broken arms. Both broken legs. He had to use a wheelchair and had pins in his legs for over a year. Apparently, my mom pulled over and pulled me out of the car. I was knocked out. And had blood all over me. She thought I was dead. Then I woke up and started crying hysterically. I was fine. I wore my seatbelt because I wanted them to think I was responsible. Since I was so small. And wore my seatbelt. All that happened to me was a fracture in my skull. By my eye. On August 4, 20 years had passed since the crash. My mom texted me and said that today marks 20 years since I was given back to her. I was swimming and got caught in an underwater cave/tunnel. Had no clue where I was in relation to the entrance or exit. Zero visibility. And no way I was getting out. My buddy luckily saw me struggling and somehow dragged me out just in time. 5 years ago, and I still get heart palpitations when I think about it. My nephew fell in a really deep river and I jumped in after him without thinking. I'm a good swimmer. But I am also partially blind and was in heavy clothing. Not a bathing suit. So, there were a lot of problems navigating and sinking. I managed to get out with him though. His dumb bitch of a mother didn't even care when my mom told her what had happened. Just continued playing on her phone and said, "Oh, thanks." My brother put a towel around me and the kiddo and drove to my house to fetch me a change of clothes and the kiddo some clothes from his car though. So that was appreciated. Was out hiking in my woods. Saw a dead tree that looked rotten and ready to fall across the trail. So I gave it a shove so that it would fall away from the trail. It started falling. The trunk shattered on the side. And it was suddenly falling sideways. Hit another tree. Bounced directly back at me. Had just enough time to take a single step to the side as several 100 pounds of tree slammed into the ground right next to me. Enough that I felt the ground shake. Would have squished me like a grape had it hit. I broke my neck while swimming alone. I was so lucky I didn't even have nerve damage. Someone I know broke his neck doing a backflip into stairs trampoline park. Dude went home and only went to the hospital after his brother forced him since his shoulder looked beeped up. Dude was mad that they had to cut off his shirt instead of allowing him to remove it himself. My friend's mom tried to beat a train in a Ford Explorer. The train slammed into the front left of the SUV. And we went spiraling off into a ditch. All I could smell was gasoline. And I knew our time was short. I opened the center console, grabbed the seatbelt cutter, and cut us all free. I used the blunt end of the cutter to break the glass no percussion point and crawled out, followed by everyone else. Since engine block took most of the damage, we were all pretty much fine. Turns out the reason I smelled gas is because of a big ass rock punctured the gas tank. So yeah, came pretty close to dying. And never rode with her mom driving ever again. Could have been much worse. I fell sick for about a week. Couldn't eat or drink anything without it coming back up. Unbearable cramps to the point I couldn't walk. My mom thought it was menstrual things until one night I was vomiting acid and things just stopped. Like everything stopped hurting and I felt this ease come over me. My mom comes in and immediately panics. I guess I was white. And my eyes were lifeless, but I felt so at peace. We rushed to the hospital. They took 9 hours to see me. At this point nurses and doctors kept trying to keep me awake, but I just wanted to sleep. They ended putting me under and next thing you know I'm awake. And I woke up screaming. They said it was impossible for me to have made it as far as I did. This was 11 years ago. It was my appendix. It had ruptured the final night when things felt peaceful. And I was experiencing sepsis at that point. Slipped and fell backwards while on a hiking trail and slid 30-odd feet to hit a large boulder at the bottom of the trail. Other side of the boulder? A few 100-foot drop. This happened to me and my wife 2 weeks ago. We're on my motorcycle wearing helmets, stopped with our signal on and displaying hand signals to turn left into our neighborhood. We had sat there for about 10 seconds when an SUV driver texting plowed through us at 55 miles per hour. Spent a week in the hospital and another week in rehab. I'm tied to a walker and the wife is wheelchair bound and will be for some time. It's amazing to consider how we survived. Very thankful to be here. We're finally home and it's going to be a long road. Luckily I work from home. December 1979. Cincinnati, Ohio. The Who concert. Myself and my friends were in the front waiting for the doors to open. In the background you could hear music playing. The crowd behind us started to rush to the door. I was literally picked up off of my feet. I'm in the air about 3 feet off the ground, wedged between two bigger guys when my left leg got caught on the handrails, spreading me apart. I yelled once the pain became too much and a guy behind me lifted my leg over, freeing me. Once inside the arena we settled down and smoked a joint. Then, when I went to relieve myself is when I saw the bodies covered up in sheets. Very thankful I was in front and not the middle. That concert is the reason we now have reserved seating vs. festival seating. Got into a huge fight with my ex, resulting in him taking an industrial-sized zip tie and tightening it around my neck. Felt my eyes start to bulge out and the blood vessels in my face pop. I stumbled to grab a pair of scissors to cut it off. The problem was that it was so tight I had to gouge my neck with the scissors to get it off. I was horribly disfigured for weeks. And kids would stare or run away from me when I was in public. I was 5 years old at the time. My dad was walking me to kindergarten. As we both crossed the street, that's when I got hit. The next thing I remember was me being under the car. After that we headed home. When I was 2, almost 3. My parents were at a wedding and my cousin 15 was babysitting us. I have no idea if my parents had approved or anything. But we were jumping from the inside windowsill onto a mattress on my bedroom floor. We were living in a 2-story house. The windows were open. Little Iloror in her infinite wisdom took a step back too far. And because I was small enough I could fit fully through the window. I fell the 2 stories. And landed head first on concrete. My cousin asked my siblings where I had gone. And my sister who was 4 replied that I had fallen out of the window. My cousin of course didn't believe her. But after some coaxing looked out the window to see my unconscious on the ground. Surprisingly, I didn't suffer from any real injuries. I had concussion from the fall. And apparently when I landed directly onto my left eye, so I had a badass black eye. The only lasting effect from the fall is now the fact that my skull is crooked. And so my eyes aren't level. Not that noticeable in day-to-day life. But incredibly visible when you look at me in the mirror. Liver failed at 17. Was listed for transplant and waited 2 years on the list. Was circling the drain. They decided to try a Hail Mary transplant with a living donor. Thinking it would probably fail and in turn get me to the top of the deceased donor list. My aunt was willing to donate to me as she was a blood match. Luckily for me, my surgeons were able to make the living donor transplant work. And there was no need for a secondary. Coming up on my 10th liverversary in September. My aunt and I are both doing great. Someone stabbed me in the back when I was walking in the streets. He actually wasn't trying to stab me but to slice me and try to steal me, but he failed, and as he had failed he run away and I was there with a knife on my back and a problem to solve. But as someone saw it all, we called the paramedics, who actually told me I was lucky cause the robber had almost pierced my spine and actually sliced a little bit of a lung in the way. Had minor surgery. Was prescribed pain meds but not told the brand name of the meds upon discharge from hospital. Got my period and it was extremely heavy and would not stop after 10 days. Went to urgent care. Passed out in lobby and found out my iron level was so low I had an extreme case of blood loss anemia. Had to get 2 blood transfusions and spend a few days in hospital. Turned out they had given me Aleve, which is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug and not supposed to be combined with Eliquis blood thinner, which I was also on. DRS didn't understand how I had still been walking around before I passed out.